Good evening, guys. The other day in class, we went over the human skeleton and we looked at the bones of the body. That was good, and you guys showed some good sound knowledge. However, what you're going to be assessed on is you're going to be looking at sporting movement, and you're going to be analysing the movement, describing things like which is the agonist, which is the antagonist. Agonist, or also known as the prime mover. So the agonist is the muscle that contracts. The agonist is the muscle that lengthens. Um, what I want to look at though today is movement, the movements of the body. Um, so the movements that we are going to predominantly focus on is things like flexion. So flexion occurs at hinge joints. Um, it does also, occur at ball and sockets. But basically, the folding up of the joint where the fleshy parts are brought together, or the decreasing in angle of the joint. So if this arm was out straight, that'd be extension, and when the gap or the angle decreases, that's called flexion. So extension is the opposite of that. So in this picture here, we can see that the arm is going from flexion to extension. So the opening out of the joint where the angle between the two bones is increased. So it's really going to be important for a lot of your movements that you can also tell me what is flexing, what is extending, what is the muscles responsible for flexion and extension, and which one is the agonist or the prime mover, and which one is the antagonist. Abduction. Abduction happens at ball and socket joints. Abduction and adduction. So abduction is away from the body or the midline. The midline is sort of a visible line that goes straight through our bodies, and you can see the arm moving away from the center line. Adduction is moving towards the center line. Okay. Now, like I just said, they work at ball and socket joints, and there are some sporting movements, or lots of sporting movements that require some adduction and abduction. But we'll go over that more in class. Supination, we don't really need to know this, but just a bit of food for thought. The way that I remember supination is when my hand is flat and I'm carrying a bowl of soup. Pronation was with the arm up, so I'm a pro. Circumduction sometimes gets confused with internal and external rotation, and it's basically when one point is anchored and the other one is moving. In this description here, we've got the woman moving her arm in a circulatory motion, and this guy here using the movement of his joint. Um, um, he's moving at the joint, but he's not moving in the sense, that's why it's circumduction. Rotation, so I've got internal and external rotation that predominantly happens at the two hip and shoulder joints. That's because it's also a movement of the ball and socket, and it's a movement around the central axis. Dorsiflexion, so that would, an example of dorsiflexion is when I bring the foot closer to the shin. I dorsiflex. A sporting example of that would be dribbling with a football, um, or what we call keepy uppies. Plantar flexion is what I use to jump, and it's when the movement of the foot gets further away from the shin, or the toes are in a pointed motion like this. Eversion, eversion, don't worry too much about that. Inversion, eversion is what we'd use for stepping. So what I really want you to understand is the agonist and the antagonist. So they work as pairs. The agonist, also known as the prime mover, and if you want to get if you want to get an excellence, you need to be able to explain what a prime mover is. So the agonist is the muscle that contracts, and the antagonist is the muscle that lengthens. An example of this is the biceps and the triceps during flexion extension. The triceps relaxes while the biceps contracts with the arm, which is not rocket science. In class, we'll go over this joint elbow. Um, I want you to be able to tell me, say, the flexion of the elbow. What is the agonist? Well, the agonist will be the bicep, and the antagonist will be the tricep. And the opposite, so obviously the tricep is for extension, is the agonist, and the antagonist is the bicep. And we'll go through those in class and see how many of those you can get right. that's probably enough for today. And we'll talk about this more in class. Thank you very much.